Welcome to task for today, TFT-21. We are studying sociology. We have been studying topic wise, and the previous TFT included social stratification and social mobility. Today we will be doing the next topic, which is kinship, family and marriage. Kinship, family and marriage are different social institutions, and they form a part of the social structure of society. While studying society, sociologists study the different social institutions, relationships and the change in these institutions which form social change. When we talk of kinship, kinship refers to the ties between individuals. It can be established through two ways. First one is through blood ties or descent, which is known as consanguineous, and the second is through marital bonds, that means through marriage or alliance, known as affinal. There is an important term in kinship which is known as descent. Members of a society who can trace their lineage to the same ancestor, they are said to come from the same descent. There are two types of lineage. They are patrilineal and matrilineal. Patrilineal is a form of kinship system in which the descent is traced through males. That means males carry forward the generation. For example, in aristocracy, it is seen that hereditary titles, they are passed through the male line, ignoring females. And when succession comes, then the younger brothers, they take precedence over their sisters. Thus, in descent, the members, they belong to a certain group. They inherit property. For example, in the case of patrilineal descent, the male members will inherit property. They will also form a part of the succession group to either titles or offices. But on the other hand, if we talk of matrilineal descent, then the descent is through the mother, and the mother's surname is carried forward. The ancestral property is inherited by the youngest daughter of the family, and the place of residence is mother's residence. Kinship also defines the rules of marriage. For example, it speaks of exogamy, that means people, members belonging to the same lineage, they cannot marry because they are considered as brothers and sisters. Now, the next social institution is the family. There are two major types of family. The first one is nuclear family, and the second one is extended family or the joint family. In a nuclear family, in a traditional nuclear family, there would be a father, mother and children. Children can be either natural, that means born to both the parents, or they can be adopted. While in the extended or joint family, it can include one family, for example, one set of parents and children. There can be a father's sister or father's brother and sister-in-law as well as children, someone who is unmarried, and also the grandparents. Here, the adult members, they assume responsibility for caring of children, and if there are grandparents, then the father and mother, they will take care of the grandparents also. But how has family developed historically? There are many thinkers, they have analyzed this development in different ways, but there is one set of thinker, Young and Wilmot. They say that in the pre-industrial society, the family was a unit of production. That means the economy was subsistence economy. The family produced only that much which it could consume. But with time, with industrial revolution, came industrial society, and these family, they developed networks among themselves, and they expanded their reach, and even some of the kins, they started living closer to one another because they helped in the economic growth of the family. But in the modern world, this form of family also faded out, and we came across a new form of family which was known as the nuclear family. And this was a symmetrical family because the housework was shared, and unlike in the previous forms of family where there was a strict division of labor for males as well as females, but in this family both of them, they shared this work. There is a very important term which is associated with family. It is known as patriarchy. It is not only associated with family but also in society. That means larger clusters of families or communities which make up a society. Here the male members, they are the rulers as well as the leaders, and they exercise power both at the level of society as well as individual households. The basic assumption of patriarchy, or the ideology which is followed by patriarchal setup, is that males are in some way superior to females, and that is why it is their natural right that men should enjoy a more privileged position in society than man, especially in terms of power and prestige. So here you can say there is a form of stratification, gender stratification, if you remember, where the male member is considered superior than the female member. And what happens in a family then? In a family, a male is given the more important or responsible position of earning livelihood, while the woman or the female is given a subordinate position, and she is only to take care of the household chores, for example cooking and taking care of the children. So this is the hierarchy that is present in a patriarchal society, in a patriarchal family. There are many thinkers who have studied family. The first one is the Functionalist Perspective. They have seen the functions of family to the maintenance of social order. And the first thinker is Murdoch. He says that family performs 4 functions. First one is sexual, second one is reproductive, third one is economic, and fourth one is educational. Sexual needs of people, reproductive, that means carry forward a generation, economic as well as educational. Economic by earning livelihood, and educational, education of the children. But Parsons gives 2 major types of functions of family. He says that a family is responsible for primary socialization of children and stabilization of adult personalities. So how is socialization being done? Because the child's personality is molded to absorb the central values of society's culture. You would remember value consensus. So family is contributing to value consensus. And the another point is that it provides emotional security to the couple and balances out stresses and strains, and thus helps in maintenance of social order. Parsons also says that isolated nuclear family has 3 characteristics. The first one is, he says, that with time a society develops and undergoes social change, and in social change the different social institutions, they evolve and specialize in fewer functions. That means they differentiate themselves structurally, and now the family, which was responsible earlier for all the needs of the child, whether it was the birth or teaching, education, these roles have been taken over by specialist institutions, for example, businesses, schools, hospitals. So the role of family has reduced, the function of family has reduced. The another function which Parsons attaches to the nuclear family is geographical mobility. He says that a nuclear family is significant to the economic system because there is a huge demand of skills, and this nuclear family, because it is smaller, it can move easily from one place to another in search of job, and where the demand for job is more or where the demand for skills is high. And this nuclear family, because it is free of obligations to kin, unlike in the previous societies, therefore it can easily move and hence increase the mobility of family. Parsons also says that a nuclear family helps in reduction of conflicts between father and sons, because traditionally a father occupies the highest status in a family, but with time, if the sons they achieve a higher status because of their jobs or education, then there may be a conflict between the father and son for the status in family. Therefore, a nuclear family reduces these conflicts because they live separately, the father and son's family. Second perspective is by Marxist. The Marxist thinkers, they explain family in terms of capitalism. First one is by Engels. He says that the monogamous nuclear family, monogamous means there is one husband and one wife, monogamy. This nuclear family developed to solve the problem of inheritance of private property. With capitalism came private property, and the major function of a family was, or nuclear family was, to ensure inheritance of this property, and also to ensure greater control over women so that they could produce offspring in order to facilitate this inheritance. Thus, the Marxist perspective says that family is a way of controlling women and to ensure that the offspring that they produce is passed on the private property. So these are the two features which Engels points out. Other thinker, Zaretsky, says that a family is a major prop to the capitalist system. Prop, if you remember, in drama and everything, we use certain props which assist the drama. So, according to Zaretsky, he says that a family is like that extra unit which is actually supporting the capitalist system. How? Because now a family is consuming whatever goods are being produced in a capitalist society, and thus it is helping the bourgeoisie to earn profits. So it is helping the capitalist system in its expansion. Also, here the domestic labor of housewives is being exploited, and what happens here? The job of the housewives is now to reproduce, to create a new generation of workers. So this is again a subjugation of women, which is highlighted by the Marxist thinkers. Another point is that a family helps in reducing the stress of the alienated workers, because they feel more and more isolated. They feel that they cannot fit in the society. During such times of stress, they find comfort in their respective families. What does the feminist perspective say? Feminist perspectives belong to those thinkers who advocated for the women's rights or women empowerment, and they spoke against the subjugation or subordination of women. There are 4 types of feminist perspectives. They are the Marxist feminist, radical feminist, liberal feminist, and difference feminism. They argue that existence of a patriarchal system explains the multiple disadvantages experienced by women, because this ideology leads to the assumption that male power and dominance are somehow natural. So they speak against patriarchy, and they also relate patriarchy with capitalism because of the benefits capitalist society gains because of patriarchy. Why? Because here women are used as a reserve army of labor. They are not the primary laborers, but they are secondary laborers. So what is the subjugation? The female members, they have to do all the housework. They also experience domestic violence. They have to bear the brunt of male dominance, and this domestic labor that they perform is not rewarded, and they have to go for unpaid work. Also, there is an element of power relationships in families. What power relationships? The male member possesses authority and power as well as prestige, while the female member is subordinated and exploited. The latest perspective is by the postmodernist. Postmodernist, if you must know, they are those set of thinkers who feel that there is no single theory which can explain any social phenomena. So in family also they feel that there can be no meta narrative. That means one single statement on one set of do's and don'ts, rules cannot describe family life. Then what do they say? There is a thinker, Judith Stacy. She says that postmodern family can be seen in the US, and in such a family there is a greater variety in the relationships. How? Because there is a diversity, there is fluidity. That means there are no rigid norms, rules to govern family. Also, here the family, there is no concept of difference in the positions of males and females, but on the other hand it is a more egalitarian relationship between the husband and wife. But there is another theory, the modernist. What do they say? They say that our society has not yet reached postmodernism, but now also we are still in the modern era. A thinker known as Anthony Giddens, you must have heard about him. He gives 2 concepts. The first one is plastic sexuality and second one is confluent love. He says that in a family nowadays, the sexual relationships that is taking place is not for reproduction or procreation, but instead it is for sexual pleasure. Also, the relationship is not permanent and it is for a temporary purpose and temporary basis only. The other term that he explains is confluent love. Here both the partners, they enter into a loving relationship because they want to get something from that relationship, and when their need is not fulfilled, then they do not want to stay in that particular relationship. They are unsatisfied, and that marriage ends up in either divorce or breakups. Modern family is also including individualism. We have had reduction in the significance of various norms which used to govern family before, and there is little security or intimacy in everyday life because people have become individualistic. They are thinking only about themselves. They do not want to think about their spouses. They want to know, or they want to fulfill their needs as far as possible, and in many ways they have a number of choices to fulfill their needs. So in such time, what happens? Here the family, it gives rise to emotional security in times of turbulence, in times of insecurity. But there is also another factor, which is that this relationship is also promoting chaos, because now people have more choices, they have more options, they have more number of partners, and the roles which used to govern a family before, for example, the male was supposed to be the livelihood, responsible for livelihood, while the female was responsible for the children. This rule has changed, and the strict boundaries which was there before, it has blurred, because now even females, they are earning livelihood. They have also become the owner of wealth. Also, sometimes even the males, they take care of the children, and this role demarcation which was there before, it is no longer present there. No fixed clear-cut rules. This leads to more conflict between the husband and wife. Thus we can see that family as a social institution has been changing, and it has changed a lot from the time when it was a traditional setup to the time that it has become a modern social institution. We have also had different new types of family coming up. These are, the first one is gay and lesbian families. Here, since sometimes the spouses, they do not choose to go for natural heirs or natural children, so they choose their families, they go for adoption. Similarly, there is an emphasis on new reproductive technologies. Earlier, a family used to rely on traditional method, traditional way to produce children, but now families are going for newer technologies. For example, some are going for surrogacy, and this has further diluted the concept of traditional family structure. The third type of family structure is a single parent family, where the spouses have divorced, or they are living separately, or either one of them has died. Thus we can see that the functions of family has changed. Earlier it was a unit of production in a subsistence economy. Whatever they produced, they consumed. But now, instead of being a producer, it has become a unit of consumption. As the Marxist perspective says, in a capitalist society, the role of a family is to consume and thus ensure profit to the bourgeoisie. Similarly, the functionalist perspective says that now there has been a structural differentiation, and the role of the family has been taken over by businesses, schools, and welfare organizations like creche facilities. Also, the feminist perspective says that now in the family, earlier the women, they used to do all the housework only, but now whatever work they are doing, which is known as domestic labor, and this ought to be paid, but it is not being paid. So family has become a source of exploitation of women. The last social institution for today is marriage. What is marriage? Marriage is a socially acknowledged and approved sexual union between two adult individuals. So this you have to understand, that it is a public institution. That means if two adult members they choose to stay together, they want to enter into a sexual relationship with each other, then they have to declare before the society, either through registered marriage or traditional marriage, any form of marriage. This is the social institution which legalizes this relationship, which gives a certificate. That is why we have the concept of marriage certificate, because after attaining this certificate, they need not fear anyone. They can go throughout the world or any place if they want to stay together, if they want to reproduce, then there would be no restrictions. No one is going to stop them from doing it because they have attained this marriage certificate. Therefore, the public concept of this social institution is very important. It is not something secret. No, you have to accept it before the society that yes, I have chosen this person as my life partner and I will stay by him or her throughout my life. Now, we remember that while studying kinship, we came across a term which was known as affinal kin. So here, when two people marry, they become kin to one another. They are affinal kins. And also, this marriage, it connects one spouse with the kins of S2. That means the kinship circle has increased. So these are the blood relatives of S2 and they have become kins to S1. There are different types of marriages. Mainly, they can be divided into two types. First one is monogamy, where there is one husband and one wife. Second one is polygamy. In polygamy, there are two types. First one is when there is one husband and there are many wives. This is known as polygyny. And the second one is where there is one wife and there are many husbands. This is known as polyandry. Now, these types of family structures or marriages are found in certain tribes where the number of females is less. So, there one female is attached to several males. Now, when we are studying India, then we need to understand that kinship, marriage and family, we have to study in two manners. Okay, the first type would be where we would consider the different regions. For example, northern region, southern region, what are the different forms of family, different types of kinship. Similarly, in different religions, what are the arrangements? How is marriage being conducted? What are the rules? What are the restrictions? For example, in some places, one cannot marry close cousins, first cousins, but in other places, marriage between cousins is permitted. So these kind of differences should be understood. Also, there is something known as incest taboo. That means siblings cannot enter into sexual relationship. It is considered a taboo. Now, with social change has come threats to marriage. Threats to marriage as a social institution. What are the threats? First one is new alternatives to marriage have come up, and second is the rise in marital breakdowns. What are these alternatives? First one is cohabitation or live-in relationships. People are staying together, they are entering into sexual relationship, but they are not getting married. Without marriage, they are staying together, they are living together. So they are not giving importance to marriage. Second factor is declining fertility and birth rates. Usually in a family, when there is a husband and wife, then they reproduce children, and these children help in strengthening the bond between husband and wife. But with declining fertility and birth rates, number of children is also reducing, and some couples are choosing not to have children. But this is not serving the purpose of marriage, because the purpose of marriage is to produce children and to carry forward the generation. Similarly, there are certain single person households. So there is only one person, so the concept of spouse does not exist. So they are also a revolt, you can say, to the institution of marriage. Now, why have marriages been breaking down, or what is the reason for this breakdown? You must be reading about these breakdowns in newspapers, that every other day we are seeing or hearing news about divorce, separation. Sometimes we hear about celebrity divorces. So what is this divorce? Divorce is when a married couple decides to end their marriage, and the marriage is terminated legally. That means they go to a court and then they enter into this arrangement that henceforth they will not be husband and wife. The second form of marital breakdown is separation, where the couple has not entered into a legal termination, but they have been living separately, probably for the children, or they do not want to go through the hassle of a divorce. The third type of marriage, marital breakdown, is empty shell marriage, where the marriage exists but in name only. It is just to show the society that they are married, but in reality they have stopped having sexual relationships with each other, and they are not close to one another anymore. So these alternatives to marriage, as well as the rise in marital breakdowns, they are threatening the institution of marriage. Now, how do we relate these concepts to current affairs? Now, you must understand that kinship, family and marriage is very important, not only for sociology but also for your essay paper in the social issues portion. Whenever you're reading newspaper, you should always keep in mind that any judgment which is a sign of social change, that means change in kinship relationships, in marriage or family, any acts, any rules, which is probably positive sign that our society is progressing, is widening, and it is coming out of its parochial mindset, or it is promoting women empowerment. Those points need to be noted down. Some of the examples here are change in the inheritance rights. For example, in the Hindu Succession Act, daughters are now being given the inheritance rights. So this is a positive step. Similarly, triple talaq has been declared unconstitutional. Adultery has been decriminalized, and we are still thinking of a universal civil code. So these points should be noted down, and you should remember that you can accommodate these points in your answers as well as in essay as well as GS paper. So today's portion you will be studying from Blue Haralamb's chapter on families and households, and you can also go through IGNOU booklets, especially for the Indian society part. Please read this portion, and there is a lot of theory as well as conceptual part, so you might find it boring, but please read it and then try to note down important points if you want. That is all for today. Your next TFT will be on religion. All the best, happy learning, and wish you a great stay with us. Thank you.